They are known as the blood drinkers of the battlefield, female spirits who linger around the corpses of those who have died violently, lapping up their blood and carrying their souls to the afterlife. But were they truly evil? Or were these blood-drinking monsters actually harbingers of fate? What were the Keres and what did they do? Let's find out. Now, there was a lot of talk in the last video about Valkyries, which is great because it's actually made me realize how little I know about them. So, if any of you would like to make a video about Valkyries, please let me know in the comments below and we can discuss it further. But while that may be the case, there were other female figures who did share similarities with Valkyries, and yet were very different. They served a role in the lore of another culture, and they had many titles, but the most common one was Keres. Now, it's important to remember that the word Keres is plural, but sometimes it's also used as singular. This is because each Keres could have multiple names depending on where she appeared and what she did. In Norse mythology, the word Valkyrie is derived from the Old Norse words val, meaning to choose, and kin, meaning kind or race. Valkyries were female figures who chose which warriors would live and which would die in battle. And this is pretty similar to what the Greeks believed when they saw the Keres appear on the battlefield. The first time we encounter the Keres is in Homer's Iliad. The poet is describing the aftermath of a battle between the Myrmidons and the Trojans. And he says that the corpses of the fallen are lying around, their bodies unburied. And their souls are unable to move on until someone comes to sacrifice for them. Then he describes how the Keres are hovering nearby, waiting to carry off the souls of the dead. Now, nowhere in the Iliad does it say that they drank the blood of the dead, but that detail came later. In the epic poem called the Chypria, it is said that after Achilles killed the Trojan hero Hector, the Keres were so pleased with him that they allowed his body to rest for 5 days before being returned to the Trojans for a proper burial. However, Achilles did not show the same mercy to the man who killed his friend Patroclus, and he dragged his corpse around the walls of the city. When he was done, the poet says, he cut him open with his bronze sword and tore out his entrails, which the garrulous crows caught up and scattered about on the ground. And he flayed his broad back with a sharp bronze hook, cutting it into strips as one skins a bullock, and hung it on a tree, binding it with a rope. And then it is said that the cruel Keres gathered in their swift black ships and sailed around the walls of the city. They sang a song of triumph and celebrated the deeds of Achilles, except there was one Keres who wasn't happy about what he had done. She wanted him to be punished. The thing about the Keres is that they were seen as impartial. That is, they didn't care whether you were Greek or Trojan, good or bad, male or female, young or old. If you died violently, the Keres would come for you. However, some sources do state that certain Keres favored certain people. One example is the warrior Achilles, who, as I just mentioned, was celebrated by the Keres for killing Hector. Another example is King Agamemnon, who was celebrated by the Keres for killing the monster Iphigenia. But the Keres who disagreed with Achilles' actions toward Patroclus was Nemesis, who demanded revenge. Her name literally means bringer of retribution. She decided that even though Achilles was a hero, he would be punished because of his arrogance and pride. So the next time he went to bathe in the river, she caused him to be slain by an arrow through his heel. Okay, now let's get back to the episode. It seems that every culture had their own version of these blood-drinking female spirits. You have the Valkyries in Norse culture, the Morrigan in Irish culture, the Bensi in Japanese culture, and the Chain in Mayan culture. Each of these groups of women had their own unique characteristics, but they all shared the commonality of being able to predict and influence the outcome of battle. Sometimes they were seen as helpers of the living, and other times they were seen as terrifying monsters. But the Greeks saw the Keres as both, depending on the situation. After the Trojan War, the poet Stasinas wrote an epic poem about the return of the Heraclidae to the kingdom of Mycenae, where it is said that the Keres once again played a significant role. At one point, King Aegisthus is trying to hide in a cave so that he can escape the wrath of his cousin, the hero Orestes. But the hero's sister Hermione finds him and taunts him. She says that he's acting like a coward and reminds him of how he killed her father Agamemnon, even though he was innocent. Then she prophesies that the Keres will take him away. Just as she finishes speaking, the ground shakes and screams are heard. The poet says that the Keres have arrived. And now it is important to understand that the Greeks did and really believed that the Keres were physical beings who lived somewhere. They were more like personifications of concepts. For example, the god Apollo was also seen as a force of nature. He wasn't a guy with a bow and arrow living on Mount Olympus. He was a representation of sunlight, music, poetry, and everything good. And in the same way, the Keres were seen as a force of nature. They represented violent death. So when the ground shook and screams were heard, it wasn't because the Keres were physically arriving. It was because their presence was being felt. It was a way of showing that violent death was near. Later, in Euripides' play, Electra, the title character is waiting for her cousin Orestes to return to avenge their father's death. She says if only the Keres would snatch him hence and tear his flesh with cruel talons, drinking his hot blood, quenching their bitter thirst. Now, in this passage, it is clear that Electra doesn't see the Keres as a positive force. She sees them as something scary. So we have all these stories of the Keres taking heroes to the afterlife, drinking their blood and celebrating their deaths, and yet we don't hear about anyone else who dies being taken by the Keres. It's always just heroes. Is this because the Greeks were biased and thought that only heroes went to the afterlife with the Keres? Well, maybe. But there is another possibility. As I said before, the word Keres is plural, but sometimes it's also used as singular. And in that case, the name of the Keres who took the heroes was Fates. The Fates were three sisters who lived at the end of the earth. Their names were Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. And they controlled the thread of life. When a human was born, the Fates would spin the thread and determine their fate. And when they died, the Fates would cut the thread. So yes, technically speaking, it was the Fates who were drinking the blood of the heroes and carrying them away, not the Keres. But here's the interesting thing. The Keres were also seen as independent from the gods. Poet Stasianus said that no god or mortal could stop them when they wanted to take someone's soul. In fact, when a hero like Achilles died, the Keres would sing a victory song, just like how a team would celebrate after winning a match. And you don't really see gods doing that. The closest thing I could find were the Olympians mocking the Titan Atlas for holding up the sky forever. But the Keres were also like the Olympians in a way, because they too were a group of female deities who lived apart from society and had great power. However, unlike the Olympians, the Keres were never depicted in artwork. We have no idea what they looked like. All we have are descriptions of their deeds. This is why I'm going to show you this picture of a Valkyrie carrying a fallen warrior to Valhalla, because this is the closest depiction we have of the Keres carrying a warrior to the afterlife. What do you think? Were the Keres truly evil? Do you think they were harbingers of fate? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and join our community of mythology lovers. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.